Tonight's headlines: Hurricane Lili gained strength and speeds toward the U.S. Gulf Coast. New possible evidence of Al-Qaeda Iraq connections. Senate control now up for grabs. Advantage Republicans. Plus, the Pacific dock shutdown threatens businesses coast to coast. New questions about passenger safety after a deadly attack aboard a Greyhound bus. And Eye on America follows two American families struggling with one of the cruelest of diseases.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. A potentially very dangerous hurricane is heading for the U.S. Gulf Coast, and the first major hurricane strike on the U.S. mainland in 2 years. Major in this case could mean a Category 3 or 4 hurricane on a scale of 5. Entering the Gulf of Mexico tonight after a nasty swipe at Cuba, Hurricane Lili is already a Category 2, which is to say winds over 100 miles an hour. And it's going to get stronger before landfall, probably on Thursday, somewhere along the Texas-Louisiana coast is the most popular guess. A destructive tidal surge, what used to be called a tidal wave on the coast, is possible before the hurricane pushes inland toward Arkansas. This storm may bring heavy rain all the way up to the northeast. It did that and more in Cuba. CBS's Bobby Harley is there.
Hurricane Lili raked the entire southern coast of Cuba with wind gusts of more than 100 miles an hour and rain that filled the streets so quickly it stranded people, making rescues by helicopter the only way out. Nearly 200,000 people crowded into shelters, like 10-year-old Alberto Quintero Diaz. He says he came here to save his life. This group left their small fishing village about an hour south of Havana, where the storm drove sea and rainwater onto the roads, making some impassable.
With 2 hurricanes hitting Cuba in 10 days, authorities here didn't even have time to assess the damage caused by Isidore before they had to start all over again with Lili, which took almost the same route, causing problems throughout the island.
All along the southern coast, the water had barely begun to drain from the roads before they once again became rivers. Bobby Harley, CBS News, Batabano, Cuba.
Here in the United States tonight, there's now an official hurricane watch posted along the Gulf Coast from St. Louis Pass, Texas, that's near Galveston, to the mouth of the Mississippi River. Official storm watches extend on east to Pascagoula, Mississippi. CBS's Cynthia Bowers is in Dulac, Louisiana tonight, where she and concerned residents are keeping an eye on this strengthening hurricane. Cynthia?
Dan, nobody here is taking any chances. The shrimp boats you see behind me have already been called into port in anticipation of Hurricane Lili. Makeshift sandbag factories are open again for business, and communities still wringing wet from Isidore just last week. And fear here is growing because Lili is already stronger than Isidore was when it hit the Louisiana coast. Levees that gave way in that tropical storm are being rebuilt and quickly. Isidore also exposed glaring weaknesses in New Orleans evacuation plans. Floodwaters went across stretches of a designated escape route, leaving thousands stranded. And that will be a major consideration as officials contemplate if and when to call for evacuation, fully aware now that nothing stands between a strengthening Hurricane Lili and the U.S. Gulf Coast. Dan?
Cynthia Bowers in Dulac, Louisiana. I spoke a short while ago with one of the world's leading hurricane experts, Dr. Neil Frank of CBS affiliate KHOU in Houston. And I asked him what makes this storm different and potentially so much more dangerous than the recent hit from Isidore.
Well, unlike Isidore that crossed the western tip of Cuba about 11 days ago, the steering currents in this case are quite strong, and it looks like that this hurricane is going to move on a rather steady course right across the Gulf of Mexico and then on into either Louisiana or southeast Texas.
Let me make sure that we understand this, that with Isidore, it glanced off Cuba and off the Yucatan, the southern tip of Mexico. This one is coming more or less straight from Cuba back out in the Gulf.
Absolutely, Dan. And see what happened in Isidore, the steering currents were very weak. And so as soon as the hurricane crossed the western tip of Cuba, it wandered south and stayed over the Yucatan Peninsula for about 36 hours and weakened significantly. This is not going to do this. This is going to go right straight across the Gulf of Mexico, and I think we'll have a landfall on Thursday.
You figure Category 1, 2, or 3?
Well, it's already a Category 2. It certainly could be a 3, might even be a weak 4. So this could be a very serious hurricane.
Dr. Neil Frank, thanks. In preparing the American people for a war to bring down Saddam Hussein, President Bush and his advisors have continually sought to link Iraq and Saddam Hussein to Osama bin Laden's terror network. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin has done some digging into this alleged connection and found new evidence which is at least enough to keep suspicions alive.
An Iraqi connection with the September 11th attacks is far from proven, but U.S. officials say they are following several tantalizing leads. When hijacker Khalid al-Midhar arrived in Malaysia in January of 2000 for a meeting of key al-Qaeda operatives, he was met at the airport by an Iraqi named Ahmad Shakir, who worked part-time greeting VIPs, a job he got with the help of someone in the Iraqi embassy. 1 week later, al-Midhar flew to the U.S. and 18 months later was aboard the airliner which crashed into the Pentagon. He is considered one of the most important hijackers because he was in charge of the so-called muscle, the young Saudi men responsible for subduing the passengers. That is not a smoking gun linking Iraq to 9/11, but it is one of several clues suggesting, though not proving, a connection between al-Qaeda and the government of Saddam Hussein. Another lead reports the chief hijacker Mohammed Atta made as many as 4 trips to Prague in the Czech Republic, dating from 1993 to 2001. So far, U.S. intelligence only has hard evidence of one trip in 2000 when Atta was on his way to the U.S. Prague is important because it has been alleged, though again not proved, that Atta met there with a senior Iraqi intelligence officer. The clearest link so far: at least one senior member of al-Qaeda fled to Baghdad after 9/11. He has since left Baghdad, and there is no evidence Saddam knew about it. Although in a police state like Iraq, people don't just come and go. No one who has seen the intelligence says it proves Saddam had a role in 9/11. But suspicious links between Iraq and al-Qaeda are becoming part of the Bush administration's case for removing him from power. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
President Bush's main accusations against Saddam Hussein involve his suspected arsenal of weapons of mass destruction. Today, United Nations weapons inspectors announced that they can start hunting for those weapons in about 2 weeks. But CBS's John Roberts reports tonight President Bush has his own ideas about that. John?
Dan, the White House moved quickly today to dispel any notion that the Vienna Agreement may defuse the Iraqi crisis. The administration declared it will stand in the way of the return of weapons inspectors to Iraq until President Bush has a tough new UN resolution to back them up.
We do not believe they should go in until they have new instructions in the form of a new resolution.
The move significantly increases the pressure on the UN Security Council to act. As negotiations continued in New York today, President Bush urged the UN to get some calcium in its backbone. He then turned his sights on the tug-of-war over congressional approval to use force against Iraq, rejecting a new Senate resolution that would draw sharp boundaries around the president's authority.
I don't want to get a resolution which ties my hands.
But Senate Democrats saw a lot they liked in the resolution, particularly its narrow focus on Saddam's weapons program as justification to go to war, and the provision that President Bush must either get UN approval or prove a grave threat to the U.S. or its allies first. And Democrats added they just might bring it up for debate if the White House didn't offer any better ideas before tomorrow.
White House sources tell CBS News they are close to an agreement over the language of a new House resolution, one they hope to bring up in committee tomorrow and then bring up for debate sometime next week. Dan?
John Roberts reporting live from the White House. Thanks. On the CBS Market Watch, a big rally on Wall Street. Bargain hunters moved into the battered stock market today, and the Dow recovered most of the more than 400 points it lost in the previous 2 sessions. Investors shrugged off new signs of a slowing economy, including a report indicating the manufacturing sector contracted in the month of September after 7 straight months of growth. The latest threat to the U.S. economy and to businesses across the country is the labor dispute that has shut down docks all along the West Coast. Sandra Hughes has the latest on that.
It's a rotten situation for the downtown Los Angeles Fruit Mart.
There's a pineapple ship that hasn't been able to come in the harbor yet.
And their bananas are stuck in containers, going bad. Up and down the western U.S., 29 major ports sit idle because of a contract dispute between shippers and union dock workers. Cargo ships eerily line up in the coastal gloom, waiting for a resolution so they can dock. When the ports are running, 90% of all containers bound for the mountain and Midwest regions come through the western ports. 50% of containers heading to the East Coast arrive here too.
So the consequences of a shutdown of the West Coast ports for the U.S. economy are potentially disastrous.
The shippers locked union dock workers off their jobs Sunday, hoping to force them to sign a contract. Workers are angry about new technologies that could eliminate jobs and a potential reduction in benefits. A resolution can't come soon enough for this Northern California auto plant. It uses the just-in-time approach to manufacturing, which requires daily deliveries of parts from cargo ships.
Our entire business is dependent on imports because we receive many parts from overseas, specifically Japan. We cannot produce cars unless we have parts from overseas.
The ships can't be rerouted to East Coast ports because new freighters are too big to fit through the Panama Canal. Although both sides had agreed to sit down with a federal mediator today, the situation has become so contentious that union officials walked out of that meeting before it even began, leaving the ports closed at least another day. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, San Pedro, California.
Coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, Republicans feeling better about their fight to regain control of the U.S. Senate. Bob Schieffer sizes up the races that will decide it. And then later, a deadly attack on a Greyhound bus. What happened to those promises of tighter security? One day after New Jersey Senator Bob Torricelli gave up his re-election campaign amid ethics questions and unrelenting Republican attack, Democrats are scrambling to find a replacement. But Republicans say too late, and tomorrow they'll all be in court for the start of a legal battle over this. CBS's Bob Schieffer in Washington reports tonight there's a lot riding on the outcome. Bob?
Well, there sure is, Dan. What makes this so important, of course, is that the party that has the majority sets the agenda in the House and Senate and chairs the committees where legislation is crafted. And with Democrats holding that bare one-vote majority in the Senate now, we've never seen anything like this. So many Senate races considered toss-ups this close to the election. From South Dakota and Minnesota to Missouri and Iowa, incumbent Democratic senators are in the fight of their political lives. Two examples. In Minnesota, where Iraq is an issue, liberal Democratic Senator Paul Wellstone is in a tough race with former St. Paul Mayor Norm Coleman. In Iowa, longtime Democratic incumbent Tom Harkin had no real problems until one of his people got caught secretly taping one of opponent Greg Gansky's strategy sessions. Now Iowa Democrats are worried. Republicans are worried about seats they hold in Colorado, New Hampshire, Texas, and Arkansas, especially Arkansas. Incumbent Tim Hutchison's messy divorce has helped Democratic challenger Mark Pryor. With so many possible toss-ups, what happens with Torricelli's seat in New Jersey may decide which party controls the Senate, and why Democrats tomorrow will urge the state Supreme Court to let them put a new Democrat on the ballot.
I believe that the courts will say that this is circumstances that allow voters in New Jersey who had no say over any of this to have a free, fair election.
And why her Republican counterpart will argue the deadline for substitutions is long past.
The New Jersey law is crystal clear. The Democrats are trying to rewrite the ballot because they know they're losing, and that's wrong and it's against the law.
So 2 years after a presidential election that was finally settled by the U.S. Supreme Court, we could see another legal battle that goes all the way to the same court to determine who runs for the Senate in New Jersey in a race that may well decide which party controls the Senate. Dan.
Bob Schieffer in Washington, thanks. Walter Annenberg, publisher, philanthropist, and diplomat, died today at his home in suburban Philadelphia. He was 94. Walter Annenberg was a friend and confidant of several U.S. presidents. In 1969, his friend Richard Nixon appointed him ambassador to Great Britain. Annenberg made billions in publishing. He was the founder of TV Guide. Over the last decade, Walter Annenberg gave away much of his fortune to schools, colleges, and art museums.
And I'm sure.
Police in Fresno, California are holding a 27-year-old man on murder charges after he allegedly attacked a Greyhound bus driver, causing a highway crash that killed 2 people and injured almost 30 more. As CBS's Vince Gonzalez reports, this case is raising new questions about the safety of bus travel post 9/11.
Authorities feared the worst, a possible terrorist attack, as one man with a pair of scissors plunged an entire busload of people into chaos Monday night. Witnesses say the driver struggled with Arturo Tapia Martinez, a transient from Los Angeles. As they fought, the bus, which was going 70 miles an hour, slid off the highway.
It was tumbling, kind of were moving back and forth rough, and all of a sudden it flipped on its side.
2 female passengers died at the scene. Dozens more of the riders were injured. However, it turned out not to be what was most dreaded, an act of terror. But since September 11th, both Congress and the industry have worried about the vulnerability of terminals and buses to terrorist attacks. Despite those fears, real security changes and the money to pay for them haven't materialized. Almost exactly a year ago, in a similar crime in Tennessee, a man slit a bus driver's throat, causing a crash that killed 6 passengers. After that, Congress promised $200 million federal dollars for bus security, but appropriated less than 10% of it, just $15 million.
For the motor coach industry, it's 2 cents per passenger. For airlines and Amtrak, it's up to $5 per passenger.
While Martinez now faces multiple counts of murder, authorities admit increased security might not have detected the weapon in this crime, a simple pair of scissors. Vince Gonzalez, CBS News, Fresno County, California.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, Eye on America, living with Alzheimer's, how families try to cope. It's a hard fact of life. More than 4 million Americans have Alzheimer's disease. As baby boomers age, the number will triple. And the long-term impact of the disease reaches far beyond the patient alone. CBS's Elizabeth Caledon revisits 2 families you've met before in tonight's Eye on America.
Packed everything. It's been a summer of difficult decisions for the families of Don Miller and Ruth Becker.
And here's Erica and your son Paul.
Ruth and Don, who have Alzheimer's disease, continue to slip further away. What would you say are the biggest changes in the last 6 months?
Much more confusion.
Which one? The doc who went fishing, Bob?
In July, the Millers held a family reunion on Cape Cod. Heart Vacation, Heart Summit meeting.
I just felt very strongly that this would be the last summer when he had any kind of verbal skills, any kind of recognition of us being a family.
Don's children, Brian and Laura, came from their homes in California and Alabama to help plan for the future. Diagnosed at age 55, Don, now 59, faces years of care.
You don't really have any sense that there's a change from one day, 1 month to the next.
But Sue Miller does.
It's a very cruel disease.
As Don's primary caregiver, Sue is battling her own depression. The intensity of his round-the-clock care is exhausting and exasperating.
Last time I asked him to pack, he packed 2 pairs of underpants, a pair of shorts, and about 32 pairs of socks.
And now Sue is panicked that the family finances won't last. The daycare center Don attends in Connecticut costs $80,000 a year full-time.
Good morning.
So Sue is exploring less expensive options where her children live.
It's your decision on this. Both Laura and I'm sure both of us are willing to take care of Dad and everything. Okay, but it comes down to you and your sanity.
As the family debates, Don waits.
I'm waiting for somebody to come up with a cure somewhere.
Oh, I don't know, my husband. The situation is different for the Beckers. Ruth is much older and much more frail.
That's all you are.
Since her husband Bob died last year, she lost 50 pounds and developed seizures, a common problem in late-stage Alzheimer's.
Yeah, sure.
Norman Relkin is one of her doctors.
Her care needs are similar to that of a 2-year-old child.
Come on, you're going to camp.
Ruth just started visiting a daycare center twice a week. Justine Butler is her caregiver and oldest friend.
She's very happy now, and we just enjoy being with her.
Ruth's sons are determined to keep her at home.
She's going to stay in the house, and she's going to do the best she can here. Winter, summer, spring, fall, you know, here she is in her home, making her choices on her own level.
But home is becoming increasingly unsafe.
Rip this out.
Ruth can no longer navigate the spiral staircase to her bedroom. For both families, Alzheimer's disease involves constant rebuilding and remembering.
The single most important thing is to always remember who they are and always remember the person that they've been throughout their lives.
Easier said than done when it comes to a disease that steals something from everyone it touches. In New York, I'm Elizabeth Caledon for Eye on America.
And that's part of our world tonight. Because of the already demonstrated strength and potential widespread danger from this hurricane developing in the Gulf of Mexico, we'll be doing the broadcast tomorrow night from the Gulf Coast, and we'll be staying on top of this hurricane story for the rest of the week. Till tomorrow night, Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News, reporting from New York. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com, AOL keyword CBS News. Where and when will Hurricane Lili strike? Latest estimates tomorrow. Experience CBS News.